Hey, I'm Abbey.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're sisters.
My big sister Abbey has a Master's of Divinity from Earlham School of Religion and has been telling me Bible stories for probably 15 years.
And my little sister Shannon has seen 13 versions of Jesus Christ Superstar and has read parts of the Sermon on the Mount. Together, we're bringing you fun facts, historical context, and Bible stories.
Well, Bible stories according to you.
No, according to you.
According to you!
This is the Bible.
According to my sister.
Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Abby, how's it going?
It's good. How are you?
I'm good. It's kind of in that weird zone between Christmas and New Year's, that like week where you don't know what day of the week it is ever.
Yeah.
We're obviously not recording on January 3rd when this is getting released, but New Year's is coming up.
It is. So we thought for our intro today, we could maybe do something a little bit shorter and a little bit more fun. And talk about our New Year's resolutions, or our thoughts on New Year's resolutions, if nothing else.
You were trying to remember what yours was, and I went and Googled history of New Year's resolutions. And this says, Babylonians made promises to their gods at the start of each year that they would return borrowed objects and pay their debts. So I've got a bunch of books I have to return to people, I think.
Fair enough, I suppose.
So that's, I guess, transformed over thousands of years into what we have now, which is New Year's resolutions, where everyone decides to go to the gym in January.
Yep.
I guess. I don't know. I don't think I have had to write down like a New Year's resolution since third grade. And I think then I remember I was so mad because I didn't want to do the project. You had to write it on like baby New Year's outfit, and we had to write down a New Year's resolution. I was so irritated, and I went to Mom, and I was like, what should my New Year's resolution be? Because I didn't want to do this project. She was like, maybe you should be nicer to your sisters. And I think that was the last New Year's resolution I ever wrote down.
I'm not sure I've ever written a New Year's resolution down. I maybe had...
You didn't even have to do it for school?
I don't remember having to do it for school. I mean, they might have, and I've just forgotten it because, I mean, there were so many years... Well, they just kind of, ask you to do that kind of thing. And if I did, I'd probably just totally fibbed
you were just
about,
like,
I don't know, be a better person, or I don't know. I think since then, I mean, I tried once or twice, but it never, meant anything to me. So nothing ever came of it. It was like, oh, right, I'm supposed to do this thing. So I'll do it, I guess.
Maybe?
But I mean, I actually sort of...
You sort of have one this year?
I mean, I sort of have one. I mean, it's a general thing. I'm in this massive transition in my life where, I just left my previous job and I'm just trying to start my own business and career and possibly moving. And so a lot of just changes going on. And so since I'm really ending my job in December and starting something new in January, I guess my New Year's resolution, if it's anything, is to really reframe my life to have, more intention in it, and more fun and more relaxation, and just kind of have it in a rhythm and a flow that works better for me, that pulls in, my spirituality, which has kind of gone to the sidelines a lot in the past year or two because I've been so busy, but also my emotional health and my physical health and my work life and volunteering and all of that.
I know you do that some, though, because you're always talking about, I actually managed to go on a walk today, or you, go to meeting on Sunday. So you've had strings of that in the past.
I had all these strings, but they were literally, strings. Things were right, I've got to do that, or I should do that, or trying to fit it in between everything else. And now I'm really wanting to try to, realign it so it all feels more joyful, and it all kind of feels more intentional, and a slower, better pace to life.
Joy is a wonderful thing, and that should be everyone's New Year's resolution. Yeah. I love that. I mean, to pull all that stuff in and feel joyful about it, as opposed to, having it be a chore or something like that.
So, I'm already taking, baby steps towards that, and
awesome.
Hopefully that'll keep continuing through the rest of the year.
Good. I don't have one quite as set in stone as you do. I think my biggest thing is wanting to do more, I guess it's kind of in the political sphere, or just in the being socially conscious sphere. I feel in school, when I was in high school, I did a lot, and I was very vocal about things I believed in, and I had principles, and I really stuck with them. And since then it's kind of gotten more like, it feels more wishy-washy and like it's exhausting, or I just don't feel like doing it right now. And so I want to be more persistent about sticking with my principles and really being vocal about it. So when somebody is having a conversation with me about something, instead of just agreeing with them because it's easier, find a way to be respectful and still say what I think, finding ways to do that and be like sticking to my principles even in difficult situations. And that's hard. I think that's going to take some figuring out, but if I don't ever start, it's never going to happen. So that's my big thing for
I think that's a really good one too. It's big, but that gives you room.
Yeah. So obviously, this whole thing is about doing Bible stories and stuff. So should we scamper over to the Bible story corner?
Let's scamper over to the Bible study corner.
Okay, so what do you have for us today?
Today
is it a Bible story?
I don't necessarily have a Bible story. At one point when we were talking about topics we could share in this, you mentioned that you don't really know much about the letters in the New Testament.
I know nothing about the letters in the New Testament.
Yeah, and I mean, they're not stories in general. So I kind of went, okay, well, let's figure out how to do this. And so today we're going to be talking about the book of Philemon, which is in the New Testament.
Okay, so it's a whole book.
It's a whole book. And
just like Matthew or Mark or Luke, whatever. It's Philemon.
Yes.
I've never even heard of that book.
Well, that's because in most Bibles it's about a page long.
Seriously?
Seriously. Which is kind of another reason why I thought it would be a good place to start, is because it's small. And so...
Really small?
I don't think it's the smallest one, actually. But it is pretty small. And so I, naively thought it would be easy to talk about.
Yeah.
And as I did some research and things, they got a little bit more complicated, but we're going to keep it fairly simple. So I guess some context first about letters in the Bible is that a good chunk of the New Testament is just a series of letters or epistles from one person to a group of people.
And epistles in this sense are...
It's kind of like a where am I and what am I doing and what am I offering you all, kind of in a more pastoral sort of sense.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
So, I mean, letters is a better word. It's that they're just letters. They're letters written from one person to a group of people.
Okay.
The fun or challenging part of all the letters is that you really only have half the story. So the people who are writing to the congregation assume that everyone they're writing to knows what the situation is in that place. If there was a conflict, they all know what the conflict is.
Yeah, and it's like getting half of a telephone conversation.
Exactly. So we have all these letters where we only have half of the conversation. So we have to do a lot of guesswork and figuring out so what are they talking about? What was that situation? What can we glean from that? So any of the letters is going to be kind of an interesting, we think this might have been the situation because of this one line or this one word. So keep that in mind, especially when we're talking about Philemon today. We don't know the full story. And we'll never know the full story.
Okay.
The one other thing I guess I can mention about letters in general is that they have an introduction and a thanksgiving, and then the body of the letter, and then a closing.
Okay.
I'll point some of that out in Philemon, but just kind of in general, that's the layout, the literary layout of the letters in the New Testament. So thinking about Philemon specifically, it is a letter by the Apostle Paul.
So it was actually written by the Apostle Paul.
Yes. To the best of our knowledge, this letter was written by Paul. There are a few letters that claim to be written from Paul, but we don't think they were. This one we do think was written by Paul.
Okay.
There's lots of things that go into figuring out if it was an actual letter written by Paul or written by whoever they said it is. It usually has to do with language that is used, earliest references to said letter, comparing it to other letters that we're pretty sure were written by a specific person, and just taking all of that and looking at it in the original language. You can usually figure out if someone wrote it or someone didn't write it. Near universally, everyone thinks that Paul wrote Philemon.
Okay. Are there things that were written by Paul that aren't in the Bible that we, just out of curiosity?
Probably.
Do we know? Probably. Okay.
But from everything we know, the majority opinion is that Paul wrote Philemon, and he probably wrote it around the year 60 AD, so in the first century.
Okay.
A few decades into Christianity being a thing.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's like right from the heart of it all.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why Paul is probably is really well loved in a lot of Christian circles, and so many of his writing has got in is because it's really early writings.
Okay.
The other thing to really know about Paul in this context is that he got thrown into prison a lot. And
Like any good Christian.
Any good Christian.
Blessed are the persecuted, right?
Yeah. And in this letter, he refers to being imprisoned. Most likely, imprisonment was actually more like house arrest, not prisons the way we think of them as today. We're not sure where he was imprisoned. Tradition has him being imprisoned in Rome when he wrote this, but it could have been more in like Asia Minor, Turkey area, because he references communicating with people closer to that area, and this in another text that was written around the same time. So
that's amazing. So how wide? I mean, he's in Turkey, so it's like this widespread thing at this point, Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, he's traveling around, and a lot of the other disciples and apostles are traveling around and spreading the gospel of Jesus all over the place.
Speaking to both Jews and Gentiles, like Romans.
Yes.
And
yeah,
okay.
So another reason why Paul is so big in the Bible, that specifically he really went out and preached to the Gentiles, which are non-Jewish people. That was his main audience. He was really focused on converting the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, to this new religion, which at that point was probably starting to become a new religion, but it was still very much intertwined with Judaism at this point, or at least part the Jewish tradition. So Paul is an apostle who's traveling around and preaching to Gentiles, gets imprisoned around 60, and writes this letter.
Okay.
Which brings us to Philemon.
The actual letter. Okay.
The actual letter. So thinking about how to talk about this letter, like I said, it's about 25 verses. So it's pretty short. And there's the traditional narrative of Philemon, and then there's the more newer and less, I guess, approved majority opinion of Philemon. But I thought it was really interesting that it seems to be gaining some ground in some places. So I thought I would kind of bring that up too.
Okay.
So, like all letters, Paul starts with an introduction of who he is. He talks about being a prisoner of Jesus Christ, and then he has a whole bunch of thank you for this, and thank you this person for this, and thank you this person for this. So he's obviously...
And these are just random people?
They're people in probably like the church or congregation to which he's writing. He's actually not writing to a congregation. He's writing to a specific person, which is very rare in the letters.
Okay.
But they're probably all in the same congregation where this person lives. So the letter is intended that other people would read it, not just the recipient of the letter. Mm-hmm. And then it gets into the body of the letter. And the traditional story goes like this. There is a slave named Onesimus who does something to... Yeah, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. And he does something to anger his master, Philemon. And so he runs away. And he either runs straight to Paul, or he just encounters Paul on his escape. He and Paul get to know each other. Onesimus converts to Christianity. And this is all kind of the backstory from what we can glean from the letter.
Nope, that's fine.
Which brings us to the body of the letter, where Paul is sending Onesimus back to Philemon with this letter saying, please receive him. He's coming to do my work. Please forgive him for what he's done and take him back into your household and reconcile. I'll pay for any expenses he incurs. Thank you very much. And then he has some closing, I'm writing from this place and with these people, and I'm wishing you all the best.
Okay.
That is the traditional version of this letter. And so it's a letter about slavery, is how it's usually thought of and framed. And that's because there's this one verse, which I'm actually going to read out. It's verse 15 and 16. I'll read 15 and 16. It says, perhaps the reason he was separated from you for a little while was that you might have him back for good, no longer as a slave, but better than a slave, as a dear brother. He is a very dear to me, but even dearer to you, both as a man and as a brother in the Lord. So there's this one line, this whole thing that says he's a slave, or he is as a slave. And so it's always kind of interpreted as a story of a slave. We think he may have stolen something or not been a good slave, because later on, Paul says, I'll pay for anything. He's obviously displeased you. And so this letter is really used a lot in like the Southern slavery in the United States.
So this was used a lot.
Yes, slave masters really liked this. It was preached to the slaves themselves, as you know, respect your masters and do what they tell you narrative.
One of those great examples of how you can take the Bible to say what you want it to.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's really been thought of as the story of Philemon for probably hundreds of years. I mean, there's always probably been different interpretations throughout the ages, and people kind of maybe contradicting that. That's been the majority kind of view. And again, most of that is just kind of gleaned from half of the story that we have.
What do you mean half the story that we have? Just because it's all from the letter, it's all just what Paul wrote. It's
all just what Paul wrote. And if you read the letter, which again is really short, so it's an easy read, it never doesn't say this person is a runaway slave. It never says that he stole anything. It never mentions what he did to frustrate Philemon. It doesn't have any of the things that we put into it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we have this letter in the Bible, and it doesn't necessarily say all of these things, but people have read it, and then underneath that kind of fabricated and built up this whole narrative, like the slave narrative, which is the traditional narrative. And then we have this other one. It's the same letter, but they've built this newer narrative around the same thing.
Pretty much, yeah. There's some story there, and it's clear like why they made these stories, but yeah, we don't really have the full story. It's things we made up from the parts of the letters we do have.
Which kind of brings us to this minority view that at least some people are starting to pay attention to. And like the leading person behind it, his name is Alan Dwight Callahan. And I don't know much about his background, but it was a book I happened to pull off the shelf, and it was really interesting because he's saying, at least trying to make the case, that Onesimus wasn't a slave. And his reason behind it is, one, it says as a slave, it doesn't say a slave. So kind of implying maybe he was kind of in a slavery kind of position or was thought of as a slave. And then the next line actually says that Onesimus is dearer to Philemon than Onesimus is to Paul, and that it was not actually in this translation, but it's in a different translation, which is, when you think about translation, is kind of equal to the translation I read out of.
So when we talk about translations, what do you mean? Like, what are the different translations,
okay, so,
what is?
Right, really good question. There are lots of different translations, and there are translations that are more or less true to the original text. Probably the ones that are closest or the best translations is the New International Version or the New Revised Standard Version. I was reading out of the New International Version, but I also conferred with the New Revised Standard Version, and the New Revised Standard Version has a slightly different translation, which is the one that Alan Dwight Callahan, I think, was using, and maybe another person who I was just double-checking his work on was using. And so those two are kind of the top ones, so using either one is a pretty good basis for thinking you have a pretty good idea of what the text was actually trying to convey.
So they, when they translate for those, they really take into account, like, what did these people then mean? And they just do a lot of...
Yeah, as best they can, and then what is, like, equivalent in the English language now.
Okay.
Yeah. So the New Revised Standard Version says that Onesimus is dearer to Philemon both in the flesh and in the Lord. That's kind of implying perhaps they were brothers.
Okay.
Because they were dear to each other in the flesh, as in the Lord.
Okay.
Which is a different relationship than Paul apparently is having to Onesimus.
Yeah, because they're not brothers.
No, they're not brothers. Some commentaries say, oh, well, when they say in the flesh, they just kind of mean like, on a human level, they're like brothers. But if you go on that, Onesimus is closer to Philemon than Onesimus is to Paul, you can say, well, that could be true, but there seems to be some different relationship between the two of them. Another commentary I was reading who was taking what Callahan was saying, another thing to think about when you read that passage is that Paul doesn't emphasize the fact that they're brothers, or that they know each other in the flesh, or they're close to each other in the flesh. So it's kind of assumed
that
they're on an equal level.
Because the people reading the letter would obviously know that they're brothers.
Yes.
And it would be weird to write to somebody and be like, and you are related to such and such a person.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. And so there's no like emphasis of like, this is a really weird new thing that I'm throwing out there that you two could be related. And if you are going from like that, you're all human brother thing, that would be a revolutionary idea in Rome or the Roman Empire. And he's not emphasizing that it's a new revolutionary idea. So it's probably they're related in some way. The commentator I was reading was saying, well, they could be like brothers with the same parents, and Onesimus fell into debt and got sold into slavery. Or maybe they're like half brothers, and Onesimus is, maybe the child of a slave, and so is in slavery. Kind of take care of that slavery question. But these two people were saying it's more than just a story of slavery.
yeah.
It's a story of these two people who have some kind of falling out. And maybe that falling out is over money. Maybe that falling out is because they are brothers and don't get along. Who knows?
Yeah.
So if you also take that perspective that maybe they're brothers who had a falling out, you can kind of go back to an earlier passage in this book where Paul is sending Onesimus to this area to do Paul's work. And so if you're reading it in that text, this letter isn't about necessarily reconciliation. Like, you two need to get along. It also can be read as an introduction letter of, I'm sending someone who's near and dear to me to be there in my stead, take care of them while they're there until I can join them. And since you two don't get along, also be great if you could kind of like reconcile and fix some of those issues. There's this whole other thing that often gets lost in that Onesimus is being sent to do Paul's work there. He's a missionary now because he's a Christian. And he has things to bring, slave or not.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like the two narrative kind of stories that can be told. I'm sure there are many others in there.
Yeah. I mean, you can think about it in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I
You have a question.
I don't know if I have a lot of questions. I'm just curious if you could distill this down, like why. So this letter sounds to me like Paul sending somebody off to preach the word of God. Not necessarily. I mean, to a group of people who already, I guess, are believers, who are like whatever form of Christianity existed then, and he's just sending this letter with him to be like, I get the situation you're in, but I've talked to this, I'm going to call him Odysseus, that's wrong.
Onesimus.
Onesimus. Onesimus to you as somebody who knows what's going on. So that's what it sounds like to me. I haven't read it, obviously, but when you were talking about it, is that the kind of the distillation?
So that's really the first chunk of the letter. The second chunk says, I know there's been some conflicts, get along.
Yeah.
And then, like, it finishes with, whatever expenses there are, I'll pay, but please accept him and take care of him until I can join you.
Yeah.
Thanks, y'all.
That sounds totally reasonable.
Yeah, that's the letter. That's what we have. And so we have read a lot into it.
Of course.
About what their relationship is and what does that mean and what can we do with it. And for a long time it was just a slaves obey your master thing. But
I am so glad I'm not an apostle, because if somebody were to read my emails and try to figure out some like religious divine information from it, they would be up a creek without a paddle. It would it would be useless. But so I guess you can still like divine some kind of information from this letter to Philemon. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was read with the intent that more people could read it or should read it, but they all also knew the situation, and it was kind of an introduction letter of, I'm sending this person to you, take care of him.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of layers there, apparently, that we just don't actually know the truth of.
Yeah.
And so we have done things with it in the past that have been really horrendous to many, many people.
Yeah.
I think nowadays it's often read more as a get along with each other and forgiveness and reconciliation.
That's a good moral to get out of it. I like that.
Yeah. There's a lot, as I was telling you, that when I was preparing for it, like, I thought this would be a really easy thing to do. And then I kept reading it, I'm like, well, I could do something with this, and I could do something with this, and something with this. So even a short letter has a lot to it.
Yeah.
So it's intriguing, if nothing else.
It is. It does sound intriguing. I think on my end, it's something that in context of the rest of the Bible might make more sense. Because this is the first letter I know anything about, I've ever learned anything about. So it's interesting.
Well, I'll keep trying to throw other letters or parts of letters because some letters are really long.
Yeah.
But
that one was interesting. Thank you.
It is interesting. Yes. Which brings us to what do we call it? Shannon's
silly stuff with Shannon.
Silly stuff with Shannon corner. And what have you got for me?
Well, okay. So as I noted in the outro of our last one, when Abby and I were recording our first episode, they actually posted their first cast choice. So I feel really silly having to bring the Jesus Christ Superstar thing back to everybody this week. Hopefully next week I'll bring a cool movie or something. So obviously I have to tell you guys who they cast for some of the roles for the Jesus Christ Superstar Live. That'll be on NBC. Hold on, I had to Google how many days we have left till April 1st.
Because Easter's on April 1st.
Let's see, it's 92 days from the day we recorded, so it'll probably be less by the time we actually put this out. So, okay, point is, they cast 2 people. So the day we recorded our last one, they cast Alice Cooper as Herod. So to kind of explain, I don't know, do we need to explain the entire Easter story? I'm not going to.
Don't explain the entire Easter story, but who is this Herod guy, and why is he important to the story?
Yeah. The second act of Jesus Christ Superstar, Jesus is kind of bounced back and forth between Pilate and Herod.
These religious leaders,
as kind of the judges, they're leaders. They're the people everyone wants. How do I explain this? Yeah. They're the people in charge. They take Jesus.
It's Pilate, who's the governor from Rome, and King Herod, the Roman puppet king.
Yeah, puppet king. And he's definitely played like a puppet king. So in all of the Jesus Christ Superstars, he has one song. He comes out for one song in the second act, and they ham it up. When I watch the different versions, I always wait to kind of see what they're going to do with Herod, because sometimes it's very vaudeville, and sometimes it's just everybody wearing hula skirts. In the 1973 version, it's just this big tubby dude in short white shorts just dancing like a goober. So I don't know much about Alice Cooper. I kind of Wikipedia'd him real quick, but he's definitely got that huge, broad showmanship to him.
Yeah, so perfect casting.
Perfect casting, because for this is where you cast the superstar or the person who just needs to show up for one song, do something crazy, and
cameo.
Then can leave. Yeah, it's like a cameo part. So I think they did a good job. I don't know that much about Alice Cooper or any background on him, but definitely showmanship. So I think it's going to be really weird. I think it's gonna be a weird scene, and I'm not personally excited because I don't know about him. I'm not personally attached to him as a performer, but it's gonna be weird, and I'm kind of excited. So I think it'll be awesome. Yeah, that's the first person maybe not the first person they cast, but the first person they announced. It's a low stakes person to put out there,
Yeah.
And then the big news. Sorry, were you gonna say something?
I was gonna say, did they put out a bigger person?
Yes, they did. So the bigger news, which came out, I got on Twitter, and I'm scrolling down, and Jesus Christ Superstar Live is trending on Twitter. And I'm just like, what? Yes, it's trending, and I click on it, and John Legend's picture pops up as...
Nice!
They've cast him as Jesus.
Awesome!
And I was like, oh, this is great.
How much controversy is there?
I didn't see any. Mostly I saw people being really excited about it.
Oh, that's amazing.
I don't know much about John Legend. He had a really popular song 2 years ago that I didn't really know, but his song Ordinary People, which I looked up, and it came out in 2004, which makes me feel very old. I love that song. I used to YouTube it all the time to listen to it. He is a pianist and just has a soulful, very rich music to him. So seeing him cast was fantastic. 2, he is black, so we get a black Jesus. A lot of people were stoked about that. I was too. I was like, yes. That was really great to hear. So that's all I knew about him, and then I Googled him just to get a little more information for this. And he's from Ohio.
Nice. We're from Ohio.
Our home state. He's from Springfield, Ohio, which
I drive by there all the time.
Exactly. I was going to say, like, I only know Springfield because I drive through it all the time. It's on Highway 70, which is the one that just cuts through Ohio. So if you've ever been trapped on that road that just keeps going forever through Ohio, that's 70, and you'll pass Springfield. So he does a lot of philanthropy. He's raised a bunch of money to get the Springfield High School like a new auditorium. I mean, he's done a lot of other bigger things, but he's just like attached to his hometown and just seems like a genuinely good person. And so it was exciting to see him pass.
I think so. Have you ever seen like someone who's not white and like a person of color playing Jesus?
Yeah, definitely. There's not. I think I said this in the last one. They like to cast like the blonde, blue-eyed Jesus, but I've seen a lot, especially with like the smaller town productions. They tend to have a wider casting. There was something else I wanted to know. Oh, so the other question is, can he act? Because I'm less musically inclined than I am like in tune with people who can act well. If you can't sing but you can act well, I'm totally into it, which is probably why I'm the only person on the face of the planet who likes the 2000 version. So I don't know if he's a good actor. We'll find out. He was in La La Land, but the clip I saw of La La Land with him in it, he was singing. So I don't know if he's a good actor. We'll find out. Abby knows this. When I watch Jesus Christ Superstars, I always text her like 20 things about the Gethsemane, which is a song in the second act where Jesus just chews the scenery and is super dramatic. So we'll see how that goes.
It's like his breakout song.
It is. Totally.
So, both amazing.
Yes, both really good. And so today, after we're done recording, I'll get online and they'll have cast somebody else. But
just tweet about it.
I promise not to talk about this for a third episode in a row. So if something else does come out, I'll tell you it, but then we'll move on to something else. I'm really excited. I have a lot of feelings about this.
I've noticed. It's adorable.
I think that's it. Do you have any... Is there anything else you were dying to know about this Jesus Christ Superstar?
I don't think there's anything I'm dying to know about this Jesus Christ Superstar, at least right now.
Okay.
But I do have our final question for you, Shannon.
Oh, right. Before we wrap up, you have one more question for me. And what is that one question, Abby?
So, Shannon, what's the Bible?
The Bible is... Oh, it's totally a moose. It's a moose!
I'm shocked.
I am too!
You and your obsession with moose.
Hey, this is Shannon jumping in at the end of the episode with a few notes, as always. First off, thanks to Stephen Kartenberg. He made the music Kutalele's Happy Place featuring Kara Square, which we used for our intro and outro music. I will actually be posting the URL to that song on our Facebook page this week, so you can get on there and look at more of their music. If you want to reach out to us, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We are at Bible Sisters on Twitter, and on Facebook, we're facebook.com/Bible Sisters. I think that's all I have for this week. Pretty short notes and updates. We will be back on January 17th, I believe. That's 2 Wednesdays from now. Have a fantastic couple of weeks, and you'll hear from us soon.
Let's scamper over to the Bible study corner.
Transition music. Okay, you can cut that out later.
Yeah, we can just leave it in there. It's a fun little... Okay.
I do the transition music now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you have for us?